Okay, this upcoming video I recorded before the meetup, so I have to make this intro just to put at the very beginning. But thank you so much to everybody who came out to the meetup. It was extremely fun. I mean, JN also gave us this for the new studio next year, which obviously is extremely badass. I had a great time meeting all of y'all. And yeah, just thank you so much. I wanted to put this out there.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, guys, I understand. For whatever reason, I mean, there are a few players in fantasy football you're simply not allowed to say a bad thing about. I mean, there are a few players across every position. A guy like Terry McLaurin, a player that we're about to talk about in Nick Chubb. Once you bring up their name, and if you say anything in a negative light, I mean, you are going to have everybody at your door just calling you stupid, telling you that you have no idea what you're talking about. It doesn't matter the argument that you actually present. It doesn't necessarily matter what you say with the numbers behind it. I mean, people are passionate about a few players. So I know we are going to have a lot of people coming at me because we're going to be saying bad things about Nick Chubb. But I want to ask y'all, please refrain yourself until we get through with our entire Nick Chubb discussion. And then after the discussion, you can then go down to the comment section and don't just say, Mason, you're stupid. Mason, you don't know what you're talking about. You can start off your comment like that, but you better be following it back with some numbers and what you are expecting from Nick Chubb and why you think that he has top 3 overall running back upside, because I am here to say I do not see it. There is no way that Nick Chubb is a top 3 running back this upcoming season, and being drafted in the first round, that's the kind of upside you have to have. Now, of course, we're going to talk about all of this in this video, but before we do, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and support the show on Patreon. We are so close to 400 Patreon supporters, where when we hit that mark, we are creating that $500 buy-in fantasy league. I am paying for my own spot. I am paying for another person's spot to be in the league as a giveaway. So go over there, enter the giveaway, enter that league. Now, yeah, that's it. Let's dive into this video. Let's talk about Nick Chubb here. So Nick Chubb going at 10 overall consistently. I mean, you are very rarely seeing Nick Chubb fall out of the first round. I mean, you simply never see it. And what you do see a lot of the times is you see Nick Chubb going ahead of Austin Eckler, going ahead of Cam Akers. And as of late, you've actually had Saquon Barkley falling down drafts. And I've seen Nick Chubb in some of these best ball leagues and some of these high stakes redraft leagues go ahead of Saquon Barkley, which is absolutely ridiculous. And I will address the fact that there are 2 main things that get people excited about Nick Chubb, and both of them are extremely valid. So the first thing that we have to talk about is the fact that the Cleveland Browns should have the best offensive line in football this season. I mean, not only were they one of, if not the best offensive line in the NFL last year, but if you look across really any site that you're going to go to, I mean, what I'm using here is mainly PFF. Now, I know a lot of people have problems with PFF, but I think that they are completely fine to use as a gauge of what you should be expecting from offensive line play. They have Cleveland as the #1 offensive line, which obviously is a massive thing here for Nick Chubb. And another thing working in the favor of Nick Chubb is he's one of the most talented running backs in the NFL. I mean, you can come out here and you can make the argument that Nick Chubb is the most talented running back in the NFL. Now, I don't know if I can get there. I don't know if I can necessarily say he's better than Dalvin, he's better than Derrick Henry, better than Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, but that's not necessarily the argument here. I understand some people want to make that, which is fine. I will just say, sure, for the sake of this argument, let's say you're right. Let's say Nick Chubb is the most talented running back in the NFL. Now, what does that mean for him in fantasy? What has it meant over the past few years, and how can we use that to project him for 2021? Because we're looking at Nick Chubb, so he's 25 years old, so obviously you're not necessarily expecting him to get better on what he was last year. I'll say that this is about the running back peak. You expect running backs to hit their peak at 23, 24, 25, 26 years old, and then after that, it is the decline. But you don't have to worry about Nick Chubb declining or losing a step at all this season, but you're not going to be projecting him to really get any better than what he was last year. Now, one thing that I have not heard anybody talk about, and it's pissing me off because we've heard this so many years. We heard this all offseason last year with Alvin Kamara, with Joe Mixon, with Dalvin Cook. We heard this a couple off seasons ago in Melvin Gordon. I mean, where is the conversation around Nick Chubb potentially holding out this upcoming season? Now, I understand there are reports with Nick Chubb saying he wants to stay in Cleveland. There are reports saying that Cleveland wants to retain Nick Chubb, and of course they do. Nick Chubb is one of the most talented running backs in the NFL, and this is a team that desperately wants to run the ball. So, of course, it makes sense that Nick Chubb is going to be a Cleveland Brown. Now, I think what we have to focus in on is we have to focus in on the money itself and what we are going to be looking for in a guaranteed sense with what Cleveland is going to be giving Nick Chubb, because I would be surprised if we ever see an NFL team give that Ezekiel Elliott contract out again to a running back, despite whoever that running back is, because you see time and time again. I mean, it doesn't matter who the running back is. Once they get that Ezekiel Elliott level contract, I mean, 2 years down the line, teams are really regretting that move. So here with Nick Chubb, even if there's only a 5% chance that this is a player that is not on the field week 1, that's still something we have to talk about. That's still something that is up in the air, even if the probability is extremely low. Now, that's not the main thesis on why you need to be avoiding Nick Chubb in this offense, though. And why I really want to avoid Nick Chubb is I believe what we have seen from him in recent years is best case scenario. In best case scenario, he's a low end running back 1. Now, this past season, he was actually the running back 8 in points per game. He finished behind running backs like David Montgomery, like James Robinson, which I understand both of those guys were getting every single touch in their backfield. So, of course, they're going to finish ahead of Nick Chubb. But that's why I am kind of avoiding Nick Chubb, because we go through with recent years and you look at Nick Chubb in 2020, averaging about 15 and a half carries a game, averaging 1.3 receptions per game. He had 101 total yards a game, and he had 12 total touchdowns in 12 total games. So you look here and you go, okay, Nick Chubb, a fantastic running back with what he is doing on a per touch basis. And this goes back to the argument to be made saying, hey, Nick Chubb, he can easily be the most talented running back in the NFL. I mean, this is someone that goes through and posts a 5.5 yards per carry. Now, I understand. Don't go to the comment section and argue with me about yards per carry. There are so many variables that go into that one statistic that it's not a good statistic at all to try to evaluate running back talent with. But at the very least, it's somewhere to start. At the very least, it's somewhere to look at. And here, that's third in the NFL among running backs. So Nick Chubb is right up there with what he's doing on a per touch basis. And he also had 1 rushing touchdown per game this past year. So you look at that across the entire NFL landscape, and you see that is tied for second in the NFL, which obviously, this is something you have to note. You have to understand that Nick Chubb is already at the very top in what he is doing on a per touch basis and what you are finding with his touchdown volatility. Now, we understand that touchdowns are the least predictable thing across all of fantasy football. I mean, you can predict targets, you can predict carries, you can predict yards on a year-to-year basis because they are highly correlated. Now, what you have a very hard time doing is predicting touchdowns. We can naturally say that Nick Chubb should be near the top of the NFL given his red zone usage and given the fact that if they are inside the 5-yard line, I mean, you're going to find Nick Chubb in the majority of the packages there. I mean, we're not going to sit here and argue that Kareem Hunt is going to be getting those goal line touches. I mean, he's done it in the past, but I am not going to try to project that this upcoming season because Nick Chubb is elite in that area. Nick Chubb is a fantastic running back at the goal line, but you can't necessarily project a running back to be top 2 in the NFL in converting those touchdowns every single time. I mean, it's going to be very hard to try to find someone if you just understand the math behind fantasy football. If you understand what correlates season to season. I mean, finding those players that are going to be top 3 in the NFL in yards per carry and rushing touchdowns per game, if you were trying to bet on that on a season to season basis, I mean, you are going to be a losing player. You are going to be someone making bad bets because we know that you are having that volatility come along with it. What you want to be chasing is you want to be chasing the usage of these running backs combined with their talent profiles. And yes, Nick Chubb has that elite talent profile, but simply the usage is not there because we go back to this and we go, okay, so Nick Chubb, out of the volatile statistics that you're going to find, out of what he's able to do on a yards per touch basis, and also how he's converting those rushing touchdowns, he hit his best case scenario in 2020. I mean, I would be very surprised if Nick Chubb automatically jumps up to being the top running back in the NFL in rushing touchdowns per game, the top running back in the NFL in yards per carry, because to project someone to do that is nearly impossible, especially when we have not seen it before, and especially when they are coming off a season like this. So I am arguing that Nick Chubb just saw his best year. And I know a lot of people are going to be saying, but Mason, he was great, wasn't he? No, he was the running back 8 in points per game. I know he's very fun to watch because he's such a talented player, but we need to focus in on the fact that you were not having him as that elite asset when Kareem Hunt is in there. I mean, we go back to 2019, so just 2 seasons ago, where Nick Chubb was able to play the entire year. And here, Nick Chubb, hey, he was another low-end running back 1 on this season. He was the running back 10 throughout the entire year. And what you really like to see with Nick Chubb in this season is he actually averaged 3.1 receptions. But I want to remind everyone, what happened in 2019? What happened was Kareem Hunt was suspended for the majority of the season. So Kareem Hunt had the majority of his time on the bench with Nick Chubb getting the targets out of the backfield. Now, once Kareem Hunt comes back in Cleveland in 2019, you actually have Nick Chubb dropping down to being the running back 19 in points per game when Kareem Hunt played. Now, I understand a lot of people don't want to buy into that, but this is what happens when you have a running back that isn't getting usage in the receiving game. This is how low his floor is, because we look at Nick Chubb during this 8-game stretch and we go, okay, Nick Chubb, the exact same usage that he had in 2020, literally down to a T. I mean, here he averaged 18 carries a game and 1.3 receptions. That's actually more touches than he had in 2020. In 2020, he averaged 15 and a half carries a game and that 1.3 reception mark. Now he has the same amount of total yards per game. I mean, it's like a mirror image of each other on the seasons, where here he averages 101 total yards a game. But we understand that touchdown volatility. We understand how hard it is to project those touchdowns on a season-to-season basis. So here, during this 8-game stretch, Nick Chubb only sees 2 touchdowns total during those 8 games, and that drops him down to being the running back 19. So we have seen this over 2 seasons now with Nick Chubb. We have seen him be one of the best running backs in the NFL on a per-touch basis. But the problem is, when you're looking at Nick Chubb, this is someone that is not going to be getting 20 touches a game. And you don't need to be getting 20 touches a game to be an elite fantasy running back. I mean, we've seen Alvin Kamara finish as the top running back in fantasy. We've seen Aaron Jones be a top 3 running back in fantasy before. And those guys don't necessarily get 20 to 25 touches a game. But what they get is they get targets out of the backfield. And in a PPR format, that is going to be so damn important, because here with Nick Chubb, I mean, literally, he has to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns. He has to lead the NFL in yards per carry if he wants to build on anything that he had last season. I mean, he's capped out, in my opinion. Unless you see a Kareem Hunt injury, then possibly you're seeing Nick Chubb go up to being the running back 3 overall. I mean, at that point, yes, I would say if Kareem Hunt tears his ACL tomorrow, you'd probably have Nick Chubb as the running back 1 in fantasy. I mean, if you're talking about drafts, maybe you take Christian McCaffrey ahead of him. Maybe you take Dalvin Cook. But I mean, Nick Chubb will be right up there. But the problem is Kareem Hunt is soaking up so much of that target volume. And what's really funny is I've seen on Twitter lately, people talking about Kareem Hunt as if he's a potential cut candidate. I mean, they're talking about the fact that Kareem Hunt doesn't have much guaranteed money on this contract. And I'm saying, you are just selling a narrative that will never happen. I mean, they had the option to not be paying Kareem Hunt in 2021 if they didn't want to. If y'all remember, Kareem Hunt actually only had 1 year left on that deal for 2020. And then what they did is they brought him back with an extension before last season even started. They went out of their way. They added another year to his contract, most likely giving them leverage if they didn't necessarily want to pay Nick Chubb this offseason, which I will say they're going to pay Nick Chubb, but they're also going to keep Kareem Hunt on the roster because Kareem Hunt is not necessarily being overpaid in the slightest. This is someone that has a clearly refined role on this team. This is a team that doesn't have a significant running back 3 behind Kareem Hunt. So there is no incentive at all for this team to go through, move on from Kareem Hunt to sign Nick Chubb to that extension. What's most likely going to happen is there's most likely going to get an extension with Nick Chubb, and you're going to be back in the same exact situation that you had with Nick Chubb in a committee with Kareem Hunt in 2020. Now, I will say, if you want to leverage this elite offensive line for the Cleveland Browns, hell, I'm completely fine with you going out there and drafting Kareem Hunt. I mean, Kareem Hunt right now is being drafted as the running back 24 in leagues. So you're drafting him as a low-end running back 2, high-end running back 3 in your fantasy league, and I'm completely fine with this because we saw in 2020, Kareem Hunt averaged 12 carries a game, 2.5 receptions, 71 total yards, and he had 11 total touchdowns in 16 games. So this was good for a low-end running back 2 finish. And I understand some of these games came without Nick Chubb, but what was very surprising with Kareem Hunt last year is that stretch where we did not have Nick Chubb for about a month. I was expecting Kareem Hunt to be a top 5 running back. I mean, I was expecting Kareem Hunt to go out there and just be a pure league winner where he's going and averaging 25 points per game. Well, it didn't happen. You actually had that 4-game stretch look very similar to what you had with Kareem Hunt the rest of the season. And if we go back to 2019, I mean, I just want to emphasize that he is a player getting targeted out of the backfield. This is someone in 2019 who saw 4.5 receptions a game. Now, I know that a lot of people will be saying, but Mason, I don't want to be drafting a just purely receiving down running back as my running back 2, as my high-end running back 3. And I'm saying not only are you drafting someone that you know you're spending the running back 24 pick on him, he's most likely going to finish in that range if Nick Chubb remains healthy, but he is essentially a Tony Pollard that you can start every week because we hear it time and time again that if Tony Pollard went down, he would be a league-winning running back. He'd be a top 10 guy with no Ezekiel Elliott. And I am here to say that if something happened to Nick Chubb with a holdout, if something happened to Nick Chubb with a season-ending injury, all of a sudden, Kareem Hunt would be a top 10 running back. Lock it in. I mean, you go through and you look at his best season with the Kansas City Chiefs. It was actually back in 2017, his rookie year, where he averaged 17 carries a game, 3.5 receptions a game, 111 total yards, and he had 11 total touchdowns in 16 games. So this was good for the running back 5 overall finish on a points per game basis. And this season right here from Kareem Hunt was better than anything that Nick Chubb has ever put out there in the NFL. So I'm saying that you see the path for elite upside with Kareem Hunt quite easily. You're getting him at a significant discount to Nick Chubb. And of course, if both running backs stay healthy, Nick Chubb's the guy you want. Nick Chubb is most likely going to be that low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2, where Kareem Hunt is going to be that low-end running back 2. But I am looking at it with the price considered. And I am saying that if you're going to be spending a first-round pick to get a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2 with Nick Chubb, that is a selection that I don't want. I mean, you've seen Austin Eckler be more productive in worse situations than Nick Chubb. Now Austin Eckler getting that upgrade at quarterback. There's no more competition in that backfield. I mean, I would easily prefer Eckler over Chubb. I don't even think that's a difficult decision in the slightest in a PPR format. I would make the argument that Cam Akers is right there as well. And I mean, oh my God, if you were taking Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley at this point, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, Nick Chubb being drastically overvalued, Kareem Hunt a completely fair value, and if you're shooting for upside, I love going after him. Now, I will say there's one player that I will never touch on this team that I just want to bring up briefly. It's going to be Baker Mayfield. And oh my God, what is going on with Baker Mayfield right now? I mean, he is being drafted as the quarterback 18, ahead of Tua Tagovailoa, ahead of Trey Lance, ahead of Justin Fields. And Baker Mayfield simply has no upside in fantasy in the slightest. I mean, if you're playing in a best ball format, you're playing in a dynasty superflex league, then yeah, go roster Baker Mayfield. I'm completely fine with that, understanding that he's locked into that starting job. But if you're playing in a league that it's a redraft format, you only have to start one quarterback on a week-to-week basis, and you have a waiver wire, there is no reason ever to go and draft Baker Mayfield regardless of the price. I mean, he is someone that should be on waivers. You look at him last year, he was the quarterback 27 behind Cam Newton, Mitchell Trubisky, Jared Goff, Teddy Bridgewater, Ryan Fitzpatrick. And the reason why he is finishing so low in fantasy is he simply has no upside in the rushing department. I mean, this is someone that averaged 10 rushing yards a game. He had 1 total rushing touchdown in 2020, and a very similar story in 2019. In 2019, he was the quarterback 28 in points per game behind Eli Manning, Sam Darnold, Gardner Minshew, and Kyle Allen. He averaged even less rushing yards per game that season. And what's really funny is you go through and you go, okay, if a quarterback's not going to have any rushing production at all, and we know that's going to be the case with Baker Mayfield, I mean, you would expect that if they're being drafted as the quarterback 18, I mean, this is someone that most likely has his top end pass catchers being drafted in a very high range. Well, no. I mean, with Baker Mayfield, he has Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. as the only pass catchers even getting drafted. Odell being drafted as the wide receiver 31, Jarvis Landry being drafted as the wide receiver 43. So there's literally not a chance. It's not a possibility for Baker Mayfield to actually outperform his ADP without one of Odell Beckham Jr. or Jarvis Landry drastically outperforming their ADP. I mean, you have Rashad Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Anthony Schwartz not even being drafted from this offense right now. So it makes no sense. Literally, the math does not check out. You cannot write down the projected stats for the Cleveland Browns with these ADPs making sense at all for the pass catchers. I mean, if you're drafting Odell Beckham Jr., I mean, I'm completely fine. But if you're drafting Baker Mayfield, there's no reason to do that. I mean, the only reason you draft Baker Mayfield is if you think he has the potential to be in the top 10 in the NFL in overall passing yards, because he's not getting their rushing. He can be number 6 or 7 in the NFL in passing yards, still not someone you want in fantasy given the lack of rushing production. And at that point, just draft Odell Beckham Jr., just draft Jarvis Landry. Don't be taking Baker Mayfield with his limited upside. I mean, that makes no sense. I mean, some examples of just the math behind this. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is someone that had more rushing production last year, and he wasn't even playing full games. And he also has his pass catchers being drafted at a significantly higher mark, where Mike Gesicki, the tight end 12, Will Fuller, the wide receiver 39, Jalen Waddle, the wide receiver 45, Devontae Parker, the wide receiver 49, Myles Gaskin, also a pass catching running back. So take Tua instead. I mean, take Trey Lance. We know Trey Lance is going to be an elite rushing quarterback. Trey Lance, I can guarantee you, is going to have a higher points per game mark than Baker Mayfield. I mean, his tight end in George Kittle is being drafted as the tight end 3. Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver 26. Deebo Samuel, the wide receiver 37. I mean, there's no reason to be drafting Baker Mayfield. I understand the thought process drafting Nick Chubb, but I'm telling you the math doesn't check out either. I think that if you really dive into the usage and look past just trying to build your fantasy team like a Madden team, you would really understand why Nick Chubb in the first round is a very bad selection. Kareem Hunt is really the only player that we talked about in this video that I'd be fine drafting. I mean, if you want to go after a wide receiver in Odell, Jarvis Landry, fine. I don't want to focus in too much on that in this video. But between Nick Chubb, Baker Mayfield, and Kareem Hunt, I mean, Kareem Hunt, the only guy I'm fine targeting in drafts. But thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it, even though I know y'all probably hate my guts right now. Go down there, drop a like, leave a comment telling me why I'm wrong, because I need to hear it. I need to hear the bullish case for Nick Chubb that doesn't just circulate around him being one of the most talented running backs in the NFL, because he is, but that doesn't mean he's going to get there in fantasy. Yeah, support the show on Patreon, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. Thank you to everybody supporting the show. We got some new members of the flock, and Robert, Caden, Matt, Robbie, Dan, John, Ziggy, Blake, Oliver, and Devin. Thank you, my dudes.